Good morning. My name is Kyle, and 4 years ago, when I tried to get out of bed, I noticed that I was weak. When I sat up, I required more than I normally required, where I could just sit up out of bed. I actually this time had to push myself up off the bed to get myself sitting up. I moved down to the end of the bed and I tried to put on my shorts and my socks and my shoes, and I noticed that when I tried to put on my shorts, my hands were weak and I struggled to pull my shorts up. I don't think I even tried to sit up. I think I pulled them up as far as I could and then laid back, picked my butt up and pulled them up the rest of the way and then sat back up. And then I tried to put on my socks and my shoes. And when I put on my sock, the first sock, I think I only got it about a third of the way up my foot. I got the sock up, but I couldn't pull the sock past my heel. My fingers just would not clasp the sock and grip and pull. I even tried rolling the sock over my fingertips and trying to pull my sock up, but I just did not have the strength in my fingers to hold this elasticity of the sock. And I ditched that effort and I put on some sandals and got on a t-shirt, and I went out and I sat on my couch, and I was supposed to go on a ride that morning with a friend of mine, and we were gonna take our motorcycles, I think maybe up to San Luis Obispo or Santa Maria at the time. And I texted him and I told him that I'm not gonna be able to go at 10 a.m. like we had planned. I wasn't feeling right. I didn't know what was wrong, and I didn't feel sick or anything. I just kind of felt a general weakness, and I was gonna just see how I felt after I ate and kind of got myself going for the morning. He checked back with me, I think a half hour, 45 minutes later, and when I told him that I hadn't really felt a change in my condition, he said that he was going to come over and he was going to pick me up and take me to urgent care. I had been resisting going to urgent care because in my head, I had just overworked myself, and I figured it was exhaustion or just a fatigue of some, that had accumulated, and I just needed some rest. So John comes and picks me up and he takes me to the urgent care. When I'm talking to the doctor in the urgent care, he was very, very quick to say that he couldn't do anything for me. He didn't say any more than that. He simply said that based on my presentation and what I told him, I needed to go to the emergency room, or I don't remember if he suggested this or not, but I think he may have suggested calling for an ambulance. But he was like, basically, we don't have the equipment here to test for what you might have. What you're describing is simply beyond our capabilities at an urgent care. So John and I, we're gonna head over to the emergency room, and I'm still not really understanding the severity, I guess, of what I'm experiencing, because in my head, none of this I can rationalize. As I'm leaving urgent care, I push the front door open and I walk out into the sidewalk area. As I'm stepping off the curb into the parking lot, I simply collapsed. My foot hit the ground, but my leg did not support me. So it did not react when I stepped to stiffen up. And I was on the ground before I knew it. Luckily, I hadn't hit my head. I hadn't injured myself. I don't think I had any scrapes or bruises even. I just tucked as I fell, and John was on the other side of the truck getting into the driver's side, and I just said under the truck, "Hey John, I think I need help." And he comes around the back of the truck and he sees me on the ground and he goes, "What are you doing?" So I get, John helps me to stand up, and I describe what happened to him, and he helps me get into the truck, gets my seatbelt on, and we head over to the emergency room. I think I had left a shift in the emergency room that I was now arriving as a patient in the day or 2 days before. So within 48 hours, I had been working in there, and I come into triage. John had gone in ahead of me, gotten a wheelchair, and an ER tech came out with him and helped get me out of the truck and sit me down in the wheelchair. And John pushed me in. We went into triage. The ER physician and, the triage physician and the triage physician assistant and the nurses were there. I described my situation. They got me hooked up to all the monitors. They got me EKG. They ran every battery of tests up front that they could. We talked quite a bit about what I'd been experiencing that day, and nobody really seemed to know what this could be. And if they did have an idea, nobody was really saying at the time, maybe because of what it was. And it's like, you don't want to throw something that severe out in triage, but I was probably in the emergency room for 3 hours or so. I'd been moved into ER2, which is an overflow in a sense, but a lot of times it's used for patients that are being transferred upstairs or are going to be there for a while for observation. So I was moved into ER2, and I was assisted up out of the wheelchair and onto a gurney. I was assisted to sit down and lean back and get my legs up on it and stuff. I think I was still in my street clothes. I was hooked up to all the monitoring equipment, and then Alex, the physician assistant, came into the ER2 from triage, and he asked me a few more questions about what I'd experienced, and I basically described to him, the weakness was ascending. So it started in the tips of my fingers and my hands and started to move up my arms. By lunchtime, so probably about noon, 1 o'clock, I could barely hold with 2 hands a burrito. I had to lean over the rail onto the bedside table with a straw to drink out of a Sprite can. Now, the day before and for the weeks leading up to this, I'd been doing house projects, molding, painting, essentially minor construction work, and now I'm barely able to hold a breakfast burrito and drink. I can't put down the burrito and then reach and pick up the soda and vice versa. So I'm holding this burrito trying to drink out of a soda can through a straw over the edge of the bed, and none of this I can rationalize. It's like 1 o'clock on Sunday, and Saturday night I had gone to bed feeling just fine. I had taken a nap the day before, which wasn't completely out of the ordinary. Sometimes I do nap, but it was out of the ordinary because I had not taken a nap in a long time, and I did not feel the need for a nap. I didn't feel tired or anything. When I got when Alex asked this series of questions, he then said, I don't know for sure, and we'll have to run some tests, and I'm going to go talk to the ER doctor. But this sounds like GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome. I think part of what my trouble with diagnosis up front was, and GBS is actually very difficult to diagnose up front because the symptoms, especially in Western culture, are typically very slow to set in. And my onset was rapid. It was like what is more common in Eastern Asia, somewhere rural, Mongolia, places that don't have quick access to medical care. These are the parts of the world that this is more common in how my presentation. So it's not something that is common for a physician to see in general, and my onset was even more rare. I started researching immediately online, looking up everything I could find about GBS, but again, nothing at that time that I could find resembled what I was experiencing, other than a generalized experience of weakness ascending. But mine hadn't really ascended to the point where it was diagnosable either. It was very early. I'd only noticed it for maybe 4 hours, and it was the ER physician came in and said, I was going to discharge you and send you home and tell you if things got worse to come back. And I'm glad I didn't, because if this is Guillain-Barré, we are going to need probably to continue monitoring you to see what happens. This is a very unusual prognosis right now. Your symptoms and our experience and everything we're not sure what this really is, but we're going with what we think it is. So this is our best bet right now. They called neurology, and a neurologist came down to the emergency room and met with me, talked to me, told me about the battery of tests that they were going to run, and the one I was most excited about was the spinal tap. So I've seen it done. Like I'd mentioned, I've worked in the ER, and I have seen how uncomfortable this procedure is on people. So I was very excited when I was told that I was going to get one myself. I'm still struggling at this point to comprehend the entirety of what I'm experiencing. My mind is not catching up with what could be yet, because there really is no could be. I don't know what potential this is. I'm looking at stuff that I can find online, which there's very little at the time, and it's all referencing Western exposure, which again references a slow onset oftentimes, and a fast recovery relative to the onset. Now, I also at this point didn't know the variant that I had, so that'll come a little bit later. The neurologist sets everything up for the spinal tap. A good friend of mine, one of the other ER techs, assisted me to sit up at the edge of the gurney, get my legs over the edge and planted on the ground. They brought a rolling table over to the edge of the bed, and I leaned over onto my arms, my forearms, and they pulled the table away from the bed a bit to stretch out my back, and the neurologist instructed me everything that I could expect to experience, which I was very excited about, and took a deep breath, and I tried not to move. After they numbed it up, he inserted the needle to retrieve the spinal fluid, and it did not hurt specifically. It was just extremely uncomfortable mentally, and I did feel pressure. I move quite a bit. I like to move, and when you're told that you can't move and you move often, you are focused on making sure that you don't move. And I was so focused in that spinal tap that, I don't think I was breathing. I think I held my breath, and when it was over, I was instructed, to stay hydrated and to stay laying down, so as to not get a headache and to let everything settle. Shortly after the spinal tap, I was looking at the severity of a lot of the outcomes that I could find online, and a lot of people that I could see the results of were not results years necessarily down the road. They were a year, maybe 2, or maybe 3 after onset. So the information was also not a lot regarding what to expect as far as recovery time, anything like that. So in my head, I'm calculating, okay, I need to get through, this might be a year, like maybe less, maybe 4 months, maybe 6 months, but no idea truly. My mind is still open at this point. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to expect. I'm just trying to gather as much information as I possibly can and make sense of what I can and do what I can. So I'm trying to keep my partner at the time updated. I had to let her know that I was in the emergency room again. And she was very concerned, as of course, and as I got information, I relayed that information to her, and she was also doing research, and I think that she was at work. No, sorry, it was a Sunday, so but she was researching, she was looking online, looking up what this diagnosis meant, and she was getting all the same information I was. After the spinal tap, I was moved upstairs to a room for observation, somewhere that they can continue monitoring me. I was on my cardiac monitor, blood pressure, pulse ox, and I remember struggling quite a bit at dinner time. So I'd come into the ER probably 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, I'm guessing, and by 5 o'clock I'm barely able to eat. I think I had a couple of bites and left the rest. The nurse, I believe, came in at that point and said that my rate of deterioration was too rapid for them to continue monitoring on that floor. They just weren't equipped, so I would be moved to the ICU once a room became available. I was also being set up for a battery of other tests. I don't remember specifically at that time what tests were done while I was up there, other than the blood tests, the spinal tap, a number of blood tests. And I was scheduled for an MRI. I believe the MRI was scheduled for about 2:30 in the morning. So from that room upstairs for monitoring, I was actually taken down to the MRI. And when I was in the MRI, the machine broke. I am 6 feet 6 inches tall. At the time, I was 315 pounds. It wasn't a size or a weight issue. The software, as I remember it, there was a malfunction. The machine was set to restart itself. There was a series of things that just did not work out in my favor. And I don't think I actually finished my MRI that morning. But from getting into the machine around 3 a.m., I left MRI. I got out of the machine about 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And from there, I was taken to the ICU. So this is August 3rd, about 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm guessing. I'm wheeled into the ICU, and I meet the staff in there, who I already know very well from my work, and I felt extremely comfortable. I was not nervous about the care that I was going to receive. I was not nervous about my needs being met. Simply put, I was nervous about the time that I was going to lose as that realization started to set in. And I'm keeping my partner at the time updated. She was researching like crazy, as was I. And I'm trying to relay all of the information from the physicians and from nursing to her, everything that I'm finding, all of the material on GBS that she's finding, she's sending to me, and we're just exchanging information like crazy. I'm trying to not overwhelm her. I'm trying to also keep her aware of what's going on, but also try not to concern her too much. Because again, I'm comfortable, my needs are being met. I'm assuming this is going to be a few months, and I'm told by the ICU physicians and neurology that something I need to be aware of is that my breathing might become complicated and labored. So as my nerves start to degenerate, and it's not the nerves necessarily that are degenerating, it's the myelin sheath. So it turns out the bacteria that I had consumed was a week or so prior to me going to the emergency room. I had been on a farm and with quite a few people, and I had picked up a bacteria that several other members of the group I was with, including my partner, had also gotten this bacteria and become ill from it. But for that week leading up to going to the emergency room, I had only experienced loose stool. And I just tried to stay by a toilet. But again, I knew that I might have a stomach bug. I didn't realize the severity of what I had picked up relatively close to home. So I am being told 24 hours after realizing that I'm feeling weak that they might need to intubate me. And I have seen this done. I'm not concerned about this procedure. Again, I'm very comfortable with the expertise of everybody involved. I know that in this situation I'm the novice, and I'm just going to let everybody do what they're trained to do. I'm in the ICU. I have incredible staff. All of my attending physicians are incredible. They're all knowledgeable. They're all able to easily communicate the information that they know to me. And I'm just trying to absorb as much as I possibly can so that I can start planning on how I'm going to recover. I still have no idea what this recovery that I have to look forward to is going to look like. So I'm guessing around 11 a.m. or noonish on Monday, August 3rd, 2020. That I'm starting to notice that my breathing is becoming labored, and I'd been told that if that happens, let us know. We want to intubate you in a controlled environment rather than waiting until your breathing fails or your respiratory system fails, and then we have to do an emergency intubation. So I let them know, and they set up the respiratory therapist and everybody that was going to be involved. They got everybody together, and I was told that while I was unconscious, they were going to run plasmapheresis. I did not know anything about what this is. I asked some questions, but again, I read online some that said it's dialysis in a way. They siphon your blood out and filter it to remove the bad bacteria and all of the other things that your body has released to fight this bacteria that's now attacking my nervous system. And they're gonna filter all of this stuff out so that my body will be able to heal itself. Now, from my understanding at the time, this is what I understood then. I had gone to this farm and I had gotten a bacteria that my body tried to fight, but the bacteria resembles the cells in the myelin sheath that surround or coat the nerves and allow the electrical signals to transfer along the nerve. So it's the insulation that protects the nerve and allows it to send its signals. That was the material that my body was now attacking because it resembled the bacteria. So they were going to take my blood, they were going to filter it out to remove the bacteria and all of the everything that my body had created to fight that bacteria. So it would start with a clean slate and be able to start rebuilding. I was told that when I was intubated, they anticipated keeping me sedated for 3 days. So in my head, I'm projecting, it's now Monday, I'll be awake on Thursday-ish. My partner is able to come and visit. Now's probably a good time to point out that this is the height of COVID. So from the time I came into the emergency room, COVID restrictions were in place. So I could not have visitors. I could not have people come in and see me. I could not see my partner. I could not see my family. I was able to speak to them on the phone, FaceTime, on the computer if needed, but they couldn't visit me. So this whole process over the previous day and a half has taken place in relative isolation. And at this point, they're planning to intubate me and sedate me for up to 3 days. Maybe a minimum of 3 days. And thankfully, they made an exception and were able to get my partner in to see me, because what I was going to go through could potentially kill me. So either the Guillain-Barré or the treatment or the sedation or any of the procedures that I was to undergo had the potential that I wouldn't make it. Now, at the time, it kind of holds the same relativity that having any surgery or procedure does. Mine wasn't necessarily more likely to not make it. I was simply just in a really, really crappy situation, and they had no idea how far I would decline or if I would recover or what the results were going to be. So thankfully my partner was allowed in, and I got to give her a hug, and I got to talk to her, and I got to see her, and I just wish I'd gotten more time, but it was what I needed at that time. And I'm hoping that I was what she needed at that time, was to see me. This was the last time that she was going to be able to see me for at least 3 days maybe. So this, looking back, being 4 years ago, it doesn't seem as complicated as it did then. Now, everything at the time was extreme and heightened and fast. My decline was rapid. We're still working on the assumption that it's Guillain-Barré. I don't think at this point it had been verified. They still needed to do some other tests. I know that they also needed a fecal sample, and I had not pooped since I had been to the ER. So they didn't have that to run. So at this point, I'm saying goodbye to my partner, and my brother had come. At this time, I communicated to my partner that I wanted her decisions to be valued, and I wanted her to be in charge. When she left, the nurse asked me who I wanted to be my emergency contact. And I told the nurse that I wanted my emergency contact to be my partner. While my brother was there, I had told him and I had told the nurse that I wanted him to be I wanted him to be my medical advocate if a decision had to be made that was difficult, as far as potentially pulling the plug, taking me off life support, if that's what it meant. Any difficult decision like that, I did not want my partner at the time to be responsible for. I did not want her to have to hold that decision for the rest of her life if that's what it came to. So I knew that because of my brother's profession first, I just knew that he would make a hard decision if it had to be made, and he would find a way to be okay with it. So I told them that I wanted him to make any medical decision that needed to be made, but he was to refer to my partner to collaborate. This was supposed to be something that was best case scenario, worst case scenario. So when my brother left, I knew that my partner would be able to access information regarding me. I knew that my brother would be making any decision that needed to be made. Anything that was relatively easy, not a big deal, but if the plug had to be pulled, or if I had brain injury from lack of oxygen or anything else, he might have to make a decision in that to my welfare. So he left, and they prepped me for the intubation. They got me laid down all the way on the bed, and I remember being told again that I should be awake in about 3 days, and I felt very comfortable. I did not have any worries at that moment. Next thing I knew, I had the mask coming down over my face, and I was out. Now, I remember, the next thing that I remember is I have a weird, it's not even a memory, it's a feeling that I was in a small restaurant at a counter, but it was a sense. It wasn't something that I saw. It was very, very fuzzy. I mean, I was having trouble even realizing what it was. I remember thinking that I was sitting in an armchair massager in the middle of a mall, and I just found myself there, and I started looking around and realizing that I was in a mall, a strip mall, and then the restaurant that I thought that I was in was tucked into a corner, and it was just a door. Nothing significant about it, and I saw it from where I was sitting, but I didn't make the connection right then that that's what that was, that where I felt like I had been a moment ago, I was now outside looking in for some reason. And then I was in a car, and I was driving. Where I live, there are Santa Monica Mountains, and we have a few canyon roads that go, from inland through the mountain range over to the coast. And up in the top of some of these canyon roads, there are radio towers and very large electrical line towers. And I was driving up a very steep, it wasn't somewhere I'd been, it wasn't somewhere I recognized. It was a very steep road that just seemed to go on and on and on, and the sides of it were dark and steep also, so almost a water channel, almost, but it was a road. And I'm just driving up, and I realize that there's a girl sitting next to me. I don't recognize her. I have no idea who she is. I felt like I knew her, but there was no familiarity. I don't think she spoke. It was almost like we were just traveling in this car, and I remember pulling up to the base of not a radio tower like anything I've ever experienced. It was almost like a cement or concrete bunker that was built lower than the road that was the base, and space for all of their equipment. So just all of the radio equipment and a massive dish on top. And I remember cresting off the road, and again, this is steep going up, but then once I crested into the parking lot, it was almost steep going down. And I remember having to really hit the brakes to stop the car, and I just nosed in at the bottom, and the car is still sitting in a very, very steep position when I park. And I get out, and I walk into the radio facility bunker, and my primary care physician is there. And she is part of a car club, and they're meeting for, I guess, just club things, to hang out, to talk, to work on things, to do whatever. I've known my primary care physician since I was a kid. Our families have known each other since we were all kids. And I've never hung out with her outside of, seeing her at church or coming to see her as a patient. So I have no reference for this. I don't know why I'm there. I don't know why she's there. I don't know why all of these maybe 8 people are there, all kind of sitting at controls in this space. Also don't know why they're meeting for a car club in a radio tower at the top of a very steep, dark mountain. Now, I remember leaving and trying to... the girl that I was with is still with me there in the radio tower. But again, I'm not interacting with her. She's just a presence. She's just there. I remember the two of us leaving and getting back into my car, and then to get out, I was like peeling out in reverse to get up, to back out. But in my head, it didn't make sense because I'm backing out into a roadway that's also incredibly steep, and I assume people have no reference for seeing me. So all of this is going on in my head while I'm somewhere I'm very unfamiliar with, and I don't know why I'm there. So I back out onto the road, and I'm right back. Now I'm in the restaurant. I'm sitting at the bar on a bar stool. I realize I might have been drugged. And I can't figure out why I'm disoriented. I'm sitting at this bar. I'm not really aware of my surroundings, just that I'm in almost a sushi bar or a diner bar where you just sit at the counter to eat. And I feel like I'm trying to figure out what I ate or drank that drugged me. I'm thinking I had sake and some sushi maybe. My mind is starting to form more of a picture based on my surroundings. I'm now not in the sushi bar. I'm now sitting outside the sushi bar again in the chair, the massage chair. And I feel like I can't move. I feel like I've been drugged and I'm having trouble moving and I can't get up from the chair. But people are walking by. I'm not able to say anything out loud. I'm not with the girl from the car anymore. She's not around. I kept feeling like I was getting more and more drunk, almost disoriented. It was like I was extremely drunk now as far as a visual field. Everything was very disorienting. I'm sitting in this chair. I feel like I'm upside down. My stomach is turning. I just feel a sense of being out of control. And suddenly I'm in a recovery office. Not a recovery room, not in the hospital. I'm in an office, a medical office, with a doctor or nurse practitioner. So I remember being taken aback by how beautiful this nurse practitioner was, but it didn't make sense because I felt like I knew this person, but I didn't recognize them. And I'm now wondering where my partner is. I'm in a recovery space, and in my head I'm thinking maybe, I can't see her yet. I just woke up and I need to be monitored for a period before she can visit, or maybe she's not there and she'll be there when she gets off work or something else. So I'm trying to rationalize all this, and then while I'm trying to take all of this in this moment, only a minute or two has passed while I'm trying to realize my situation in this office. I have now almost a hot glue gun, but what it does is when I pull the trigger, it's like a Nerf gun where it shoots something, but what it shoots is like hot wax, and it shoots out of the end of the gun, and then the tail cools quickly as it unravels and it spirals, but the front stays really hot. And it's almost like a pellet gun or something, but a mild version. And what I was doing was shooting it, and not at people, but I didn't realize that I had it. And I was pulling the trigger without realizing it, and it was going through people's hair, and people's hair was like melting, where the wax had gone through it. And I am not sure what's going on, so I'm aware that I don't know what's going on. So I'm trying to figure out why I'm in this office. I'm trying to figure out why I have this hot glue wax gun. I am trying to figure out why when it hits people, it just leaves like a little red mark, like if you drip a little drop of wax. I can't rationalize or place any of these things. This is just happening, and I'm kind of just jumping around from one point in space to another. And now, after I felt like I was in that office for maybe 20-30 minutes, and I thought and at that time that I was sitting up in a wheelchair. I thought that I was sitting up with my feet propped up in the little foot stands on just a hospital wheelchair. And now I'm not in that office anymore. Now I'm in an ICU style recovery hospital. I'm not in the ICU that I was in when I went to sleep. when I was sedated, when I was intubated. I'm now in a room with a window that looks out over grass, maybe 30 feet deep of grass, not high but deep across. And this room that I'm in is looking out over this lawn area, but there's some trees that are over my room window that I can't see the trees, but I can see the shadow of the trees. And beyond that is a parking lot, a parking garage for one of the local malls. So in my head, I have now woken up in a recovery space 3 miles from where I had been sedated and intubated. And I'm looking out over the parking structure to a local mall, and there's a nice, actually fancy Italian restaurant in the parking structure. And how they're set up is their kitchen is in the parking structure, and their dining is out in the parking lot and on the lawn. So it's all patio and lawn dining. And I'm laying in bed and I'm looking like this out the window as I'm watching fancy people sitting at these tables with candles and flowers and tablecloths, and I imagine I'm seeing people eating fettuccine and spaghetti and other dishes that I would recognize from any Italian restaurant that's local. So I have no clue why I'm there or why I'm seeing this. This place, I know at the time that this place did not exist, and that for me to be there, it must be somewhere that I'm unaware of or was unaware of prior to getting sick, which in my mental time frame had only been a few days. But all of the landmarks were correct. Now in this recovery space, I'm imagining, sorry, I'm not imagining, I'm seeing that I'm struggling to move, and I'm looking down my own bed, and where my hands are, I'm laying on my back with my hands palm down at my sides, my feet straight out in front of me, propped up. I'm flat on a bed in a hospital, and down by my hands I see these blue, almost like a velvety dust, magical dust bag that you would see in Peter Pan or something, or a pouch that holds coins, one of those leather ones that you pull the strap on. Something like that was on either side, one on either side, and they were blue, and they almost looked like Dodger helmet gifts that you would get when going to a game. And I started to get extremely anxious. I started to get very, very unsettled, And I started to get this overwhelming feeling that I was being poisoned repeatedly, that I was being given a continuous dose of poison, and it wasn't an isolated event. I was able to get my hands with extreme difficulty to these bags that were next to my hands. They were almost tucked between the rail to the bed and the mattress, and I was able to get my hands down inside them. And when I got my hands into them, I felt my fingers being pricked with needles, and I felt like the needles were stuck in my fingers, and I was so weak that I couldn't pull my fingers out of the bags, or my hand was stuck in the bag, so I was struggling to get my hands free. And this whole time, these needles are stuck in my fingers, so I'm struggling to get my hands free to get the needles out of my hands. And now I'm realizing that I'm feeling drugged. And in my mind, I can only associate the needles with being laced with something that was drugging me. And at this point, it's probably, in my time lapse, a half an hour that I had been struggling with this bag, or these bags and these needles, and trying to get my hands out. And this entire time that I'm struggling, my hands are starting to go numb, and I'm not able to move as much as I was when I first stuck my hands in. So things are becoming more difficult. I'm starting to feel more drugged. I'm starting to feel a heightened sense of awareness. I'm starting to feel like I'm trying to get somebody's attention and nobody's coming. And even if somebody came, I can't tell them what's wrong because I can't speak. I can barely move. And I've got my hands in these bags, and they've got needles stuck in them that I'm getting drugged by, and nobody seems to know. I'm the only person that seems to know that this is happening. And my heart started to pound, and it started to race, and I became so anxious in that moment. I thought that I was being poisoned deliberately by somebody, and I didn't know who or why. So probably 45 minutes after first putting my hands into those bags, I'm able to wiggle my arm enough, both sides, that I'm able to get the bags, or my hands with the bags on them, over the edge of the bed, beyond the mattress and the arm rail, like down beyond the arm rail by reaching. And I'm able to use the corner of the rail in the bed to kind of pull my shoulder up and start to pull them out of those bags. And I got my hands, after maybe 5-10 minutes, out of those bags. And I remember not being able to look down at my hands, but I was able to, laying flat, get my arm up over onto my tummy, and I was able to use my fingertips that were extremely weak to pull these needles out of my fingers. And I'm starting to feel extremely uncomfortable. My heart's racing, my mind is racing, everything around me is unfamiliar. I feel like people are not paying attention to The fact that I'm being drugged and somebody is allowing this to happen repeatedly in this environment, and I can't figure out what is going on. Now, I wake up again in I want to say an aquarium, a fish tank, maybe. It's large enough, like a swimming pool maybe, to swim in, but I'm floating in the water with sea life floating around or swimming around, but I have a small tube inserted into my mouth that I'm breathing through. And I'm now hearing a doctor tell my dad that they're outside this enclosure and I'm floating sideways, breathing through a tube out the side of this thing. I'm hearing the doctor tell my dad that they successfully intubated me. And they broke my teeth in the process. I'm hearing them tell my dad that everything went well, with a minor complication that they had cracked my back teeth, and they explained to him that when they had to open my mouth, they pushed down on the laryngoscope and braced it on my jaw and cracked a tooth or two, or completely shattered them. I'm not sure. But I don't feel any pain. I'm disoriented, trying to figure out why I'm floating, but I can't really see, but I see outside this enclosure to where they're standing and talking, and I'm just freaked out about my mouth. Why? What am I going to do? What is this? What is it going to take? Am I going to get an infection? Is this going to lead to some other complication? Like, this is just adding to my anxiety and the stressors that are building within me, and I don't have a way to rationalize my circumstances right now because I'm so disoriented with all of these things that I'm experiencing that don't make sense. Right after that, as soon as I was out of the water enclosure, the next moment that I remembered was being hogtied. I was sitting on my shins with my butt on my heels and my head pulled down as far down towards my knees as possible. Now there was a rope that was around my neck, and that rope was being pulled forward and down into the tightest possible position, and my hands were bound, my feet were bound, and then bound to each other. So my hands and feet were bound together behind me, and my head is being pulled down. I am forward on my knees, but down on my shins. and a man came in, and it's dark. It's just like a square box room, but I have this sense that it's like a Rubik's Cube, and it's almost like a car vending machine, where it's just a series of empty boxes within a metal frame, and they're each sectioned off to be their own, but that's all they are. It's just empty boxes within this cube. And this cube, for some reason, was sitting outside. It was probably 5 or 6 cubes tall, so that's 6 stories. Each little box, like the one I was in, was a small room, the size of a room. So this thing was stacked 5 or 6 tall, 5 or 6 deep, 5 or 6 wide, and I have no concept of how this made sense, but I was in one. A man came in and he warned me. He told me that I needed to listen, and I needed to calm down, and I needed to stop fighting. He said my fighting was just making things worse, and he left. I said, absolutely not. I'm not going to stop fighting. I didn't know that I was fighting, but apparently I wasn't going to stop doing that, for sure. Now I realized that my phone was behind me and maybe in a pocket. I was able to get it out and into my hand, and clearly having my head all the way down, barely able to breathe. My hands and feet are tied together behind me. I'm using a glass screen to try to text my partner where I was, and that I was in trouble and that I needed help, and to contact the FBI and law enforcement and track my phone, because here I am, and I think there's other people here that are in my situation too, and they need rescuing too. Please send help. So the guy came back after a few minutes and said similar things. You need to stop fighting. You need to calm down. There's nothing that we can do for you if you don't stop fighting. This is you need to just listen, and you need to stop fighting, and you need to relax. And none of those things sounded good to me. I was not going to relax. I was not going to stop fighting. I was not going to listen to... Nobody had actually told me anything that I recall. So again, I was just being told to listen, and without telling me what to listen to, that's not going to happen. So I fought, and I fought, and I fought, and I used every ounce of strength I had to try to get out of my rope. I remember feeling like my partner was nearby and not very loud, because I was not able to breathe well, and I was hogtied, and but I tried yelling or speaking as loudly as possible, saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I am here. And I was not loud. I could barely hear myself, but I was trying, hoping. My phone, they were tracking it. She's nearby. Someone's nearby and is gonna hear me. I'm here. She had sent them. The guy came back and he said, Kyle, we have tried everything and there is nothing that we can do. We're so sorry. And he reached in under my neck with a scalpel and he slit my throat. And I remember talking to God. I remember relaxing. I remember my breathing continuing to become more and more labored. I remember losing my breath slowly and suffocating. I remember talking to God. And I'm not saying I had a conversation with God, I'm saying that I spoke to God. And it came down to I had a lot that I still needed to do, but I was okay if this was it. I have had an incredible life. I've had great memories. In my opinion, I've accomplished a lot. I'm a lifelong learner, and that's what I would continue doing if I got better. I talked all this out in my head there, and it came down to I'm okay staying or going. And if you let me stay, I have a lot to do. But if I don't stay, I'm okay with that too, because I've had a good life. There's a woman that I love that I don't want to see. I don't want to have to go through what's coming next. The next thing I remember is waking up in that recovery space again, not in the hospital where I had been intubated. So not in the ICU that I had been sedated in. I woke up in this satellite ICU facility, and I was experiencing a lot of anxiety. Of course, I was agitated. I was struggling to comprehend my circumstances and my environment. And I was talking to this nurse. She would check on me and I would talk to her. And I felt like I was struggling to speak. Like I wasn't necessarily fluid in my communication. I was quiet, I was weak, I think, but in my speaking, I was able to get my points across and my needs. I remember being in this place for several weeks. And as time was passing, I would watch the fancy people at night eating at the restaurant on the lawn. One night, there was an intoxicated individual that was laying out there on the lawn, and I remember seeing him sit down, lay down, fall asleep, and then I remember seeing my family come to visit, and they came to the window, and they weren't allowed to come inside, but they came to the window, and I could see them standing at the window, and the drunk individual on the lawn. There's a little hill that he was laying on, 15 feet into the lawn, and then there's the parking lot beyond the lawn. It was empty, and I just kept remembering or going back to this lawn out in front and seeing people come and eat in the evening. And then I remember there was a fire in the community. It was where I'm from, we are prone to wildfires, and they typically remain in the open space and in the mountains and whatnot, but sometimes they do encroach and come into the community. And at this point, I thought that I was in the satellite facility, and in my head, this facility was brand new, and this facility had the ability to sit at the surface whenever it needed, but in an emergency, it could be closed and retract into the ground for protection. And I thought that the area that I was in was on fire. Huge, like catastrophic. Everything was burning out there. And I think that I told the nurse that everything is burning outside. Like, I could see it and I could smell it, and I was wondering, are they evacuating us? What are we gonna do? Where are we gonna go? What's gonna happen? Who's gonna be taking care of us? What's happening to all the staff? And my anxiety just kept building and building and building due to this fire situation, because I've been through fire season 35 years and everything is chaos. I imagined at one point that the trees that were outside my room were being trimmed. They were like weeping willows and things. And I imagined that they were being trimmed for the movie theater that was in the mall, and that they had hired people to trim these trees into Disney characters, and that these Disney characters would blow in the breeze or the wind and look like they were speaking. And I watched these trees for days, and I looked out there and I would watch them, and it seemed like every day or two the trimmers would go out and trim a tree into a different character for a different movie that they were promoting. And after a few days, I remember thinking that I was back in the ICU in the hospital. I just had a feeling that I was back in the hospital. And I thought that there was an active shooter in the neighborhood. And my window to my ICU room looked out over the main street, and I pictured this sniper shooting towards the hospital for some reason and trying to work his way from a distance in. And I remember telling the nurse, getting the nurses over, and I, at this point, had some sort of way of communicating where I was able to tell them that active shooter, and they're like, no. And I'm like, active shooter? And they're like, no. And I'm like extremely agitated at this point because I can't understand why they don't value themselves that much. I wasn't even worried about me because I was already screwed. I was worried about them. I thought that the sniper was going to shoot through my window into the nursing station or at somebody that was in my room. So what I wanted was law enforcement to obviously be notified, but more importantly, close my blinds. That's it. That's all I really wanted at that moment, was to notify them that there was a potential active shooter outside, and for your protection, close my blinds so they can't shoot you. So they were insistent that there was no threat, there was no active shooter, and I could not understand why they were not taking this seriously. It made zero sense. So I am continuing to get extremely frustrated. I am doing this for them, and they're not hearing me or paying attention or listening. Now, after that resolved, I think they probably assisted me to relax. I probably was out of it for a bit, and now I remember while I was laying on my back in my bed, my heart started to race. I remember not being able to turn my head or look over, or at the very least, I remember my eyes couldn't really make sense of anything more than 2 to 3 feet in front of me. So, I thought that I was dying again. I thought that my heart was going to explode. I felt much like what I would expect to feel after drinking 7 Red Bulls in a row within a couple minutes. Like, I thought that was it. Something had happened. I'm screwed. I'm just trying to be aware of my surroundings and my environment at this point. I'm trying to listen to what everybody's saying around me. And then I felt a hand on my forearm, and it wasn't the blood pressure cuff. The blood pressure cuff I could feel squeezing every 5 minutes because I was unstable. Every time I felt the blood pressure cuff squeeze, I separately felt a hand place on my forearm, and it calmed me. I was a lot more comfortable when I realized that what I saw sitting in the chair next to me was God or an angel. Now, I did not look directly at the chair or who was sitting there. It was a presence in the room that was touching me. And when I would look over with my eyes, I saw a gentleman sitting with his legs crossed and a book in his lap, as though he was just sitting in my room reading and monitoring me. Every time the blood pressure cuff would inflate, he would reach over and place his hand on my arm and just give me a light squeeze, like I'm here. I felt a lot more calm, and I remember over the next 20-30 minutes listening to the nursing and the doctors that were outside my room monitoring me. And I remember hearing my primary care physician outside the room, and the nurses were elevating the pitch as they were speaking, and it sounded like they were talking about what to do with me and whether or not I was going to make it, what to do, because now I was back in that satellite ICU. I wasn't even at the hospital. I was in this satellite ICU, and there was somebody sitting next to me in slacks and dress shoes and nice socks, reading a book, holding my arm every time the blood pressure would go off every few minutes. And I remember hearing my primary care physician telling the nurses about what my brother does, and that my brother had been notified of my situation and that he was on his way and they would speak to him when he got there. I heard them say that they had called for an ambulance and that the ambulance was en route. I heard the nurse give report over the phone about my condition, and a few minutes later, I remember hearing the nurse say, "Oh my God." And I heard them out at the nursing station starting to elevate their speech again. And my attention was heightened. They were saying that the ambulance that was dispatched for me had been diverted to another emergency that was closer or en route for the ambulance. So another ambulance would have to be dispatched, and that they would have to call again to dispatch a second one. Now, that's not how it works, but The nurse called 911 and requested transportation for me over to the hospital, and the same thing happened. I think this time the ambulance had been in an accident on the way to pick me up and take me, and then a third ambulance had been called for, and when it arrived, a woman medic came in to the nursing station and was getting report from the nurse, and my primary care physician was interjecting some pertinent information, which I was thankful for. This medic got into a heated argument with my primary care physician at the nursing station outside my room, while my heart feels like it's exploding and beating out of my chest, and someone sitting next to me holding my arm. And it came down to the medic was saying that they weren't gonna take any advice from anyone else because they knew what they were doing and they knew their job. Just give them a report, and they were on their way. And my nurse and my primary care were like, no, you don't understand this situation. We're just trying to prepare you for what he is going through and what might need to take place en route. And it turned out that medic left, and they called another ambulance. So this was the fourth ambulance that was gonna come to take me from this satellite ICU to the hospital ICU. And at this point, my brother was on his way very close, and I saw two highway patrol motorcycle officers pull up on the lawn outside that I'd seen, all the fancy people dining on and everything. And what I heard them saying out there was, because of all this series of events that had happened with these ambulances that were going to take me, local law enforcement was going to come and help me get into one of their vehicles and block traffic and take me to the ICU. And none of this made sense, but again, I'm just writing whatever's happening because I have no idea how I'm getting all these places, and why I feel like I've been poisoned multiple times. I remember calling out a lot for my partner when I was hogtied, when I was in the ICU, satellite ICU. I remember during the fire, I wanted to make sure that she was okay, and that I felt like I was helpless, and that there was nothing that I could do to help with anything that she was going to need to take care of or handle, because I didn't have access to anything where I was, and I was in isolation, and the world is ending outside, and there's an active shooter, and somebody tried to kill me, and I was hogtied, and all these things that separately would have been one thing, but I can't rationalize any of the things, much less all of this together. And after I woke up again, I was still in the satellite ICU. I had never been transferred to the hospital ICU. I woke up in the satellite ICU, and one of the nurses that I had known for years at the time. Now, this is all based on this story, not reality. I had known this nurse, male nurse, for years. I don't know what our history was or where I know him from or anything else. I just at that time knew that I knew this nurse, and I'd been working with him for a while, and I've known him for years. But one shift overnight at the satellite ICU, he came in, and it was him and one other nurse that were on shift that night. So 2 nurses for the ICU. And I remember the nights leading up to this that he had come in and pretty much kept to himself. He'd come over and do what he needed to with me, and he'd, visit the other patients and stuff, but I didn't really notice anything out of the ordinary. I just had a weird feeling. And I couldn't place it. I didn't know why I was feeling this way, what it meant. And then one night he came in and he got into an argument with his partner, the other nurse that was there that night. And they were yelling and screaming at each other. And I think I was one of 2 or 3 patients in there at that time. I might have been the only one that was alert, or at least alert enough to notice all of this. And the argument died down briefly, and they went into separate patient rooms. And then maybe 10 minutes had passed, and I heard them begin to argue again, and I heard it get physical, and I heard the guy that I had been referring to, the male nurse, kill the other nurse. And my heart just dropped, and I'm thinking, this is impossible, but I'm listening to it happening outside right now. And I remember security would come by and check. They'd knock on the back door that opened to the parking lot, and one of the nurses would open the door, touch base with them, they'd make sure everything was okay, and then they'd continue with their rounds. So I remember that knock came, and I had been waiting for that knock because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. It wasn't very long, maybe 10 minutes. And when the knock came, several knocks occurred, and he didn't answer the door. Finally, he went over and he opened the door, but it was just a crack. It was probably, a foot, maybe 2, and he just opened it wide enough that he could talk to the security personnel. One security personnel stayed in the vehicle, and one had approached the back door to the ICU. And I remember seeing the flashing light of the security vehicle bouncing off my room. I could see the flash in my room. And they asked if everything was okay, and he said yes. And they talked for a moment. Then the security personnel asked where their partner was, and the nurse said, "I'm all alone tonight. They called in sick last minute. I'm hoping to get somebody else in here as soon as possible, so I'm just waiting to find out if I'm getting some coverage over here." And the security personnel didn't seem to believe that. I don't know why or what. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Maybe he was a bit nervous when he was saying it, and maybe the security picked up on that. But security became curious and wanted to do a walkthrough of the facility. And I remember as soon as the door closed behind the security personnel, the nurse broke his neck. And I remember him freaking out and going, you know, what you would expect or see in any movie. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And I still see the security light, the other person's still in the car outside, and it's starting to rain. So, the other security person, once the door had closed behind the one that came in, the one in the car only waited a couple minutes and then came and knocked at the door themselves. And when he opened the door for the second security personnel, he immediately stabbed them and pulled them inside and pulled them into one of the empty rooms. And now there were 3 people dead in this room in my place that I was recovering. And all I'm thinking is I'm done. I am screwed completely. I remember being scared at this point. I mean, petrified that he was going to get away or that, you know, I was going to get killed or one of my loved ones was going to get in the middle of this when they came to visit me or something. And I'm freaking out. I can see, now I hear sirens. I hear a police car approaching in the distance, or police siren. And as the vehicle approaches, I hear the nurse freaking out still. And he took a gun off the security, and when law enforcement got close enough, he went outside and met them at their vehicle and reached in and shot them and pulled them out of the car into the ICU room. And then I don't know why this makes sense, but he pulled the security vehicle and the police vehicle into the ICU open space. So now there's 2 vehicles, and he started to put the bodies in the trunks of the cars in the ICU. Thankfully, more law enforcement began showing up. I want to say 2 or 3 more vehicles showed up. One of them, I think he shot at or hit as it was driving up, and that police cruiser crashed through the wall of the end of the facility and into one of the open rooms at the end of the ICU. And now he is barricading himself behind this vehicle, trying to shoot out at the other law enforcement, and now they're in a shootout. And he's using the various weapons that he retrieved from security from the first and I think the second vehicle now of law enforcement. He's using back. And this shootout, I feel like lasted maybe an hour, maybe 45 minutes. And this entire time, I'm hoping I'm not going to get hit. I'm hoping that he's going to get killed and all this is going to be over. He kills the law enforcement. So he starts dismembering the bodies that he was putting in the trunk. He starts dismembering the bodies that were in the other room, and he's doing this meticulously. He had made a phone call at one point, and somebody else, 2 other people showed up to the facility and started to help him load the remaining bodies into a truck. And I was also loaded into the truck. I had not been harmed. I was just scared out of my mind and disgusted by seeing all of this. We hit the road, and it becomes clear to me somehow that what's actually happening is he's taking these bodies and these body pieces overseas, and it's some kind of Sweeney Todd situation where he's selling this meat for food. And I'm in the back of a box truck now, on a highway, and one of the nurse is checking on me regularly. I don't know why he took me with him. I don't know why he hasn't harmed me. But I need significant care. I need oxygen. I need to be turned. I need my food to be managed. I need, my medications that I'm hooked up to, and any number of other things. Yet I'm in the back of a box truck traveling down the highway with bodies and dismembered bodies around me. And I remember trying to listen to their conversations up front. Nobody was in the back with me. It was just me and the bodies. And there were 3 people up front, the nurse and 2 others. We would stop occasionally for food, to stretch, to check on me. And while we were on the road, one of the other 2, not the nurse, pissed the nurse off. And while the truck was stopped, he pulled out a machete, and the second person reached their arm out, and the nurse just chopped it right off. And the person that had their arm chopped off just started running around like they obviously were in extreme pain, and psychologically it's like, what? And he picked up the arm and just threw it in the pile with the other dismembered bodies and body parts. And then he went over and chopped off their other arm, and then he hit him in right here, and the machete went so deep, and then he pulled it out and chopped their head off and chopped the legs off and just rolled them piece by piece into the pile. And that was that. The other person obviously was freaked out by this also, but the nurse was in control, and we got back in the truck and we kept going. I remember waking up at one point, and I had already crossed the ocean. Now, I don't know if I flew or if I was on a boat or what, but I was somewhere in Europe now. And it was coastal. I remember being in the back of a van with all the same equipment I'd had in the back of the truck, kind of going up through some winding coastal roads. And then I remember the van got pulled over, and law enforcement asked everybody to get out of the car and show them what was in the back. And law enforcement shot both the nurse and the partner, and I remember feeling this sense of relief. And then the next thing I remember is being back home in the ICU at the hospital, and the nurse was at my bedside, and she was trying to talk to me. And as I was coming around, I was hearing her say, "Kyle, you need to sleep. You need to sleep. You haven't slept in days." And I remember trying to speak to her and tell her why I had not slept in days. And the reality started to set in that what I needed was my CPAP. I was having trouble breathing, so I needed my CPAP to help me breathe so that I could sleep. That is what I had been missing. And very, very softly under my breath, probably as softly as was audible, I said, "CPAP." And I repeated it several times, and she put her ear up to my ear and was like, "Kyle, say that again." And I said, "CPAP." And she looks at me and she goes, "Kyle, you're on a vent. You don't need the CPAP. You're on a vent. You are hooked up to a machine that is breathing for you." This was the first moment of reality that I was aware of since I'd been intubated. And I don't remember if she told me right then or slowly over the next, she probably told me several times, and I was just so disoriented that I had no idea. That was day 12. that I had been sedated and unconscious and in a twilight sleep, and all of the experiences up to that point, from the time I was intubated and sedated on August 3rd up until the nurse saying that, Kyle, you're on a vent, you're in the ICU at the hospital, we have everything that you need here, you're being taken care of. That was the first moment that made sense. And I was extremely disoriented hearing that 12 days had passed. I could not understand that. I could not rationalize it. I'm going to keep talking about this. I'm going to share as much information as I possibly can about my experience, including things that I've already talked about and have gone through. I'm going to share as much information over the last 4 years as I humanly can, all in the hopes that everything or anything that I've been through can help somebody that doesn't know what to do. In the last 4 years, I have been through quite a bit. So I'm going to share through some more videos my experiences, the things that I've been through, the things I've overcome, the things I haven't overcome, the challenges I've faced, just various aspects of everything I can think of that I can share that could be helpful to you or to someone else that you know that finds themselves in an extremely tragic situation, and most of us, including me, are not equipped for when it happens. And to quickly try to figure out what to do, how to do it, where to go, what to do, it's extreme and it is overwhelming, not just for me, but for those around me. So hopefully, I'll continue being able to share these videos, and I'm going to keep talking about what happened next, and we'll go from there. But thank you for your time.